Hi there, Eric Yates, Behaviour Guru. Just an interview today with Bill Phillips. Now, just a little while ago, yesterday I posted a video about Rapport, and Bill saw the video and sent me a text to say I'd love to get together to discuss or have a dialogue around Rapport. So I've, as most people know, been in the behaviour management industry for quite some time. For over 20 years using NLP techniques. I've known Bill for a number of years. We met in Spain a number of years ago. And I thought it'd be great, to do an interview around the whole topic of rapport. So let's get Bill in. Hiya, Bill. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too. All the way across there in Ireland. I'm up here in the northeast of England. So, Bill, do you want to tell the viewers a little bit about you, a bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Bill Phillips, and I've been working with neuro-linguistic programming since the mid-1980s. So it was quite early in its history, I guess. I was the training manager at Manchester Airport in those days, and I was trained in a particular way of influencing people at work, and discovered that it was actually NLP training. And so I've been working with it and building it into what I do ever since. And so I love talking about NLP, as you can imagine. It's a passion of mine.
Well, it was a bit of an interesting text I got last night, because obviously I posted the video yesterday on Rapport, and it was nice to get a text from you to say that you'd like to come on. So what was your thoughts on the video?
I loved it. I mean, it was witty, it was amusing, rapid, and it was a nice kind of brief introduction to Rapport. But of course, you and I both know there's a great deal more to Rapport than just those quick few comments. And
that was the challenge I had, was to get Rapport in 2 minutes, about the 2-minute series, and it's just scratching the surface. So, I mean, both you and I agree that Rapport is very much what we call the unconscious connection between two individuals, and there's a whole range of way of getting Rapport. I'd very much tackled it from a behaviour management point of view in terms of staff working with young people in de-escalation and managing challenge behaviour. But there's certainly a crossover, what you do to what I do, and how you train Rapport. And I guess the question is, for me, is this case of it should be unconscious, but is it trainable?
Well, that might be worth us discussing, because it depends what you mean by unconscious. In the world of NLP, really, which is a study of the way human beings do what we do, how our neurology works, how it takes in data and information, processes it internally, and then gives us an interpretation or an understanding of it. And that's what programs us to operate, let's say. And one of the interesting things about building or creating rapport, I know you've got a thing about building, we'll talk about that afterwards, is when you establish rapport, what you're really doing is you're making yourself look and sound and seem a bit like the other person. It's almost like I'm copying you, I'm mimicking you in a very mild or subtle way, so that we both look and seem alike. And it's that similarity, that sense of similarity to you, that draws your attention to me when I'm copying you, so to speak. The interesting thing is, when I do that copying in subtle fashion, so that you don't notice I'm doing it, then it's almost like there's an unconscious awareness in you, which is noticing it, scanning your environment for danger all of the time. And if you can imagine, that data is going in, and your internal workings are processing that data. And so your neurology is noticing you look and sound a bit like me. Consciously, you're just paying attention to our conversation. If you're unaware of what I'm doing to make myself similar to you, then that means you can't resist it, because it would have to become conscious for you to resist it. So that rapport connection that we talk about is irresistible to the receiver, simply because they don't know it's happening. Which means if I connect with you and you connect with me, and I realize we're in sync, then what happens is it's almost like we both lined ourselves up by seeming similar. And then when I start to change like this, you tend to follow me to keep it as it was, because it was beginning to feel very comfortable. And so that's pacing, that's getting on the same wavelength. And then when I start to move, I start to lead and you start to follow. And so therefore, what you're beginning to create by building or by establishing rapport is to create a leadership and a followership. So in other words, it's a way of guiding you to somewhere else, taking you to somewhere else. It's an influencing process. And so in a way, you could say that rapport is the key to influencing, really.
I think very much what I'm interested in with the training that we do with staff is very much that, in terms of, I suppose when we say unconscious, we tend to refer to it as an unconscious connection, the coming together of two bodies, which is probably best described as beyond your awareness. Unless it becomes mimicry, then it does become very much in your focus of awareness, which is what we're trying to avoid. But I've also been interested in what I call the language of the amygdala, and what you're describing is a kind of similar thing that we're trying to get staff members who work with young people, when a young person's in crisis or a very volatile state, for them to subtly mirror that state and to connect on that level, on that deeper level, so that they will get feedback from their unconscious that this person is safe, secure, and not a threat to me. Only then, I guess, can we then start to get staff to feel as if they can pace and lead the young person. But having said that, the thing I'm always quite passionate about is, while you want to mirror or mimic somebody's state and physiology, it's important you mirror the state without actually getting corrupted or feeling of the state, if you like.
Yeah, and I think that there's an interesting thing about how do you bring someone down when they're furiously angry. And one of the things about, there's a characteristic of conversations when someone's angry, is they'll quote facts at you. They'll say, look, you've not done this, you did that, and it's your fault, and so on. And one of the ways to bring them down, of course, most of us will think, well, if I stay calm, they'll have to come down to me. No, they don't. If you're going to connect with them, you need to go up to the level of energy. So what you do is you don't become angry, but you raise your voice to a similar volume, and you say, okay. And what you do is you repeat back to them what they've just said. So, okay, so you've said that I didn't do that, that I should have done this, and it's my fault. Is that right? And so now you're on the same volume level. And of course, they're going to think, well, hang on a minute, he's agreeing with me. And I say, you know what? If that were happening to me, I would be angry too. Because I've started to lower my voice, I made the connection, and then I started to change downwards. And they'll come down with you as well. And then that comes to a point where you say, look, actually, we could sort this out. I want to support you.
I love that notion of you can't be in a conflict, in agreement. Because once you're in agreement, there is no conflict. And I love that notion of getting somebody to, first of all, to pitch and tone and get the cadence matching as possible, and then actually appear to be really listening to what the person's saying, and actually, in fact, all we're doing is just repeating back without fully getting it at this point in time and understanding what they're saying. And that's the real power of rapport. Certainly,
it's almost like and it's almost like you're not exactly paraphrasing. You're actually repeating what they're saying to you, but in a similar tone of voice. So it's almost, again, it's another level of matching. So when I talk about building rapport, what I mean is there can be many layers of rapport, not just the physiology, not just the voice tone, but in this case, what it is that they're accusing you of, or what they're shouting about or arguing about.
And we have the issue, as you well know, with building rapport, because most of the time I'm running training courses, ask me what rapport is, and they say, what's its relationship? In my view, you build a relationship, but you may deepen the rapport by how connected you become on multiple levels. And I think it's just the word building for me is too akin to relationship, and where I'm trying where possible to get staff to think more of rapport, either something that you're currently in rapport, you're connected, or you're not connected. And there's kind of a combination between the two. So I think the word build for me is where it just confuses the clientele of the staff that I'm working with, and I'd rather keep those two slightly separate. Although I do agree, we do build rapport.
And that illustrates another point, really, which is involved in rapport, which is that words are very loosely interpreted. So each of us has our own personal meaning and framework. And so we can argue about the meaning of a word like that. It's the same word and it has similar meaning in the dictionary, but you and I interpret that word according to our own kind of frame of attention or reference and so on. And so again, much of the time we believe that we understand one another because we're using similar words, but very often the only way I can understand what you say is when I interpret it with my meaning, and the chances of those matching perfectly are always reduced.
Well, very similar to the
again,
word that we tend to use an awful lot in training, which is to manipulate, and to manipulate the situation. And what I find interesting about the word manipulate is people get very object to the word manipulate when say, do you ever manipulate young people? And they say, well, no, I don't manipulate young people. But then ask the question, do young people ever manipulate you? Then it's a very resounding yes, they do. So I think with adults, we like to use words like persuade rather than manipulate. But I think there's a great benefit of manipulating a child's emotional state, especially if they're distressed and upset, to a more ecological state that works for both you and the child and gets that level of understanding. But words, as you say, tend to have a certain meaning based on, I guess, what we tend to refer to as somebody's blueprint or map of the world.
Indeed. And of course, when you reflect back to the person who's speaking to you the words that they've spoken, then you're not interpreting their words, you're just simply giving it back to them, and they know what it means because they uttered it in the first place. So again, repeating back someone's actual phrases with their actual tone of voice is another way of increasing rapport, or deepening it, as you said, in that that's another form of matching. Not only physiology.
And I particularly like that point. I think that point about the fact that repeating back and helping somebody resolve their issue without really full understanding or no understand the content of it, also I think enables the staff that we work with not to be emotionally corrupted by the child at this point. Because most of the time when I'm working with staff who work in care or education and they're dealing with quite volatile behaviours, their own belief system and their own emotional state will often get in the way of them successfully getting rapport, because they will either join the person. And I remember having a conversation with you a little while ago, and I think I mentioned in the video, I love the notion of actually two people in a physical fight or actually in rapport.
Oh, yeah, because they're in exactly the same state, they're matching one another. See, there's another dimension in our neurology which lots of people don't know about, which was labelled mirror neurons. In the mid-90s, some Italian researchers discovered that there's part of our brain, our neural networks, which tend to light up in the same way as the brain of a person who we're watching. They started with chimpanzees. They were doing experiments, and they noticed that when one of them peeled a banana or lifted a cup of water to its mouth, the brain of the one that was watching lit up as if he too was doing the same action. And they recognized that maybe there's a part of our neurology which recognizes movements in another and interprets those movements as if I were actually doing it. It's a way of, I suppose, when you think about it, it's the way of learning, because it must be how small children learn. That part of their neurology sees I'm lying like this and everyone else is like that. I want to be like that. And they start to work out how to get upright, but just by copying. And it's their mirror neurons that seem to be involved in that process and so on. So, of course, if I've got these mirror neurons operating and I'm watching you and listening to you, there's something in me which is matching what you're doing anyway. So if I then join in with that matching process consciously, then I'm actually enhancing a natural process anyway. So that rapport connection is a natural connection between people who are synchronized with one another neurologically, so to speak. But the interesting thing is when you do it deliberately with the intention of improving the connection you have, and the other person doesn't know you're doing it, they will just respond to that connection. And it's that response, that agreement, if you like, that tacit agreement, that unrecognized, consciously unrecognized agreement that gives us that ability to then move and have someone follow. And therefore, this is the structure and the nature of influence. That's the fundamental value in being able to create rapport and maintain it.
So I think that answers the question, doesn't it? In terms of, I think it is a very natural process, in which some of us that have been aware of the process can enhance our ability to do it really almost subtly, so subtly that the other person doesn't notice. But it's almost a case of then getting people on a session, face-to-face sessions work better. Now we're using this medium, which takes a dimension to another dimension, because you're only working with the rapport in terms of tonality and speech and cadence and hand gestures and things, and subtle physiology can't be as adaptable because of using this medium. But I think it's, we much prefer face-to-face. But answering the question, can it be taught? Well, the answer clearly yes. But it's almost I suppose what we're really doing, rather than being teaching people, we're just actually raising their awareness to what are natural processes, for them to notice these natural processes and then put them together in a way which makes them more effective, but then really slot them back into the unconscious where they're best fit.
Spot on. Yeah, that's it. Because I remember, there have been many times in the past where people say, so you study this NLP, does this mean you're analysing me all the time? And what I used to say to people was, well, in the very early days when I was on my training course and I was learning how to watch and listen and copy, yes, I was analysing because I had to do that in order to learn it. But just like everything else, these things get quickly automated. Once your body learns a pattern, it automates it, puts it on automatic pilot. And so after a short while, no, I wasn't analysing anything. I was just simply mimicking it. I was just simply following. Because my body knew how to do that stuff without me having to consciously pay attention.
I think how many times I've been asked the same question by saying, because you do all that neurological brain stuff, as people have referred to it, voodoo or some kind of hypnotic patterning, that you're constantly analysing people. Well, no. It just actually makes me a better version of me and slightly more resourceful when working with people. But it sits there in the unconscious, which I guess is where it should be. But I do like the notion, the fact that when you're working with teachers or educators, that they will often break rapport with a child or a group of young children in order to encourage them to behave in a way that's more advisable or more beneficial to the member of staff. Yet they're missing this trick about actually being in rapport with the entire class or being in rapport with the individual, especially ones that are causing a bit of a challenge. And I find that quite an interesting concept, that in order to communicate effectively, you're better off doing it in rapport. Yet they will actually break rapport in order to get the desired behaviour from the child, and they're kind of missing a trick.
Yeah, I think it's that fantasy that if when someone's furious and there's a lot of noise, if I stay calm, they'll come to me. No, they won't. Your calmness is like a red rag to a bull.
I think it's a case of calmness and unconnected, as a term I like to use on a training course. I want to be incredibly calm. And sometimes young people are not, just can feel incredibly frustrating, because there's the disconnect. Honestly, you don't listen to me, you don't understand me, because there's no that mirroring, matching and pacing and leading back to a calm state.
And of course, in order to create and maintain rapport and develop it, if you're watching on purpose and listening on purpose to get the information you need in order to connect with the child and build rapport, then of course that means you're dissociated from what's going on in them. It's almost like you can watch them and listen to them being furious and angry, but you don't get caught up in the emotion because you're not joining them. You're staying out here in order to watch and listen and think, how shall I handle this? And by doing that,
watching and listening,
dissociation is very effective.
Sorry, I think that process of watching and listening and being what I call filtered is incredibly important to make your rapport and communication more effective. And I think what tends to happen is staff get caught, for one of term, in the heat of the moment, and become dragged into the conflict, therefore meet the child sometimes in great rapport, but the more rapport that's not beneficial. But I think the other use of rapport, which is often understated, is the whole process of, certainly around children's services, debriefing children and getting children to reflect on situations. And I know we've been talking other times about perceptual positions, and that's a topic for another video. But actually, in fact, if you're going to really listen to somebody, repeating back for clarity and for them to explore is an incredibly useful process to get the person to feel they've been listened to. And rapport is clearly part of that and needs to be part of that. So it's something staff are certainly well advised to practice and to get more of fear with, to improve their ability to feel like children or young adults have really been listened to.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it. It's that, you hear some people talk about active listening and they say, oh, that's like leaning in and going, and so on. Well, not really. Active listening is what we're talking about. It's watching, listening, noticing the changes in appearance, those non-verbal signals, those signals with the voice, like the sound of the voice, the quality of the voice, the way the voice changes, the way the rhythm changes, the way they speak slowly, the way they speak really fast, the way they breathe deeply, or the way they breathe very shallow, and so on. When you notice all those changes and you stay with those, that's active listening. Because
you get little clues, don't you? Obviously, the work we've done with the NLP with groups is to look at the whole person, the whole physiology, and when people are relaying their story, if they're really in the story, so what we call first position, then they'll reenact every physiology they had in the story, and they fully connect with the story. And that sometimes can make them in an unresourceful state, which is a topic for another video, but it also means that we can then pick up the strength of the emotion and connect the person with that in the debriefing process to really kind of open up more choice for them, which I think is a great skill that we all have if we don't get too involved in the story and actually switch off from the processes.
Exactly. And, both of us work as coaches as well. And when you're a coach, that's what you're really doing, because very often, the person that you're working with may be in some deep distress. And the minute that you start to feel triggered off and think, oh, yeah, I know that feeling, that's happened to me, you've lost it. You've now dived in the water with them and you're trying to push them out of the water onto the raft. You can't do that. Your job as coach is to stay on the raft, to stay stable so that you can help pull them out at the right moment. And again, it's really essential to be able to stay in your balanced state and manage the processes that are going on.
And I do think that's a video for another time. I think the whole thing about understanding state and maintaining state to best support, whether it's a coach or, in my case, working with staff who get work with volatile or challenging behaviour, about how we stay filtered and have this very notion around almost like having a little Star Wars bubble around that has a shimmy blue light to protect me from something. And again, we've both been in a coaching situation where we've done rapport activities with face-to-face groups, and some people have deepened rapport so much that if they mimic somebody with an ailment, or dare I say a bad leg or something, and unconsciously aware of it, they can actually take on a simulation of that person's bad leg because of the depth of rapport they've gained with that person.
Indeed. Yeah, and that's certainly when we're doing work with people that we know have health conditions. One of the things we learn in our school of NLP is to protect ourselves from that deep connection, so that we ask the unconscious part of ourselves to become aware that should anything happen that could threaten my well-being or my health, that it sends me a really strong signal and kicks me out of rapport. And that's a very, very helpful mechanism. But we don't need to go there. There's so much to learn in the meantime.
So in terms of just a recap for the viewers, I guess rapport, we agree, it's nice to agree because then we'll be in rapport, that it is an unconscious connection of which can be trained and supported and facilitated. It's best left in the unconscious, but we can raise our awareness through activity, through training, through seminars, or through any kind of medium. But ideally, the more we start noticing how we can modify our physiology to deepen the rapport as opposed to build it, we then end up with a situation where two individuals are connected to such a level where they can benefit each other. Bearing in mind there's always a responsibility for staff to stay filtered and in a good state in order to support and facilitate that the benefit of what I call the manipulation, ecological manipulation, as it works for both parties, whereby they can both benefit from it, but actually benefit the person. As coaches, obviously, we want to benefit the people we're coaching, but as teachers and carers, we want to end up creating rapport so if children really feel they're being listened to and supported, and ultimately end up with more choice. And I think for future videos, we'll look at how, using the meta model and various other language patterns, we can help young people or individuals get into that state of choice and well-being. So thanks very much for this morning, Bill. It's been a pleasure. I'm probably going to produce a few more videos on the meta model, and I'd like to get back to you some of the time to have a discussion and conversation around it and get your take on it. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, great fun. And I'm looking forward to doing more of it. Yeah, excellent idea. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, so that's Bill Phillips. Bill Phillips over there in Ireland, NLP coach and somebody who's been involved in the NLP process for quite some time. This has been a short interview on rapport, or dialogue on rapport, discussion rapport, and there'll be more coming in the future on Behaviour.Guru or on both our website and our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.